So now I'm going to discuss two other principles that are related to what we were just discussing, specifically the principle of autonomy. The first is what's called paternalism, and the second is what is generally called Mill's harm principle. So let me say a little bit about paternalism first. Paternalism kind of grew out of a different moral theory. This theory, generally speaking, is called natural law. It's oftentimes associated with Aquinas. And what natural law theory tells us is it makes a distinction between the human law and the natural law. The natural law is supposed to be the moral law, right? It's unchanging, whereas the human law is something that can be changed, right? So you might associate natural law with sort of the unchanging moral bedrock of the world, right? It's the unchanging universal moral truths that are just always the way they are. So if killing is morally wrong, then that's going to be true no matter what anybody says about it. Whereas the human law definitely is something that can be changed. We have changed laws when we thought that, certain laws weren't very good, then we try to improve those laws. And you might think that the human law, insofar as it can be changed, it might be constantly progressing to try to get closer and closer to the natural law, sort of the universal, unchanging moral rules. Now, Aquinas and those that favor this kind of natural law theory oftentimes thought that humans, although humans could use their reason to try to understand and get at what the natural law is, this would be whatever God says the natural law is. Although we can do this, oftentimes we fail to do it. And humans being very sinful and so forth, according to Aquinas, we just fall short of this kind of standard all the time. That's why we need something like a human law to help us get to the natural law. And that was sort of the place of the church. The church would come in and help humans do a better job of being good people. So we needed someone else to tell us what to do. We could not do that on our own. Or at least most of the time we can't. Sometimes we're pretty good, but most of the time we fall short. So paternalism kind of takes that approach full steam ahead, right? Paternalism is this notion that I know better than you do. I'm the one that studied these things. I'm the one that thinks about it. You don't ever think about it. You don't study it. So you just listen to what I have to say. A really great example of this is parents and children, right? So I have a daughter, and as she was growing up, I expressed this notion of paternalism quite a bit. Some other examples that sort of help cash out what paternalism is supposed to mean. Some examples would be like seatbelt laws. You might think that the government knows better than we do, and so they know that seatbelts save lives. Therefore, they put into place these seatbelt laws because they're trying to make us good people, or they're trying to keep us from hurting ourselves, perhaps. Same thing with like helmet laws. Motorcyclists oftentimes complain that they don't want to wear a helmet. They like having the wind blowing in their face or what have you. But the government steps in and says, we know better than you. We know that these helmets are going to save lives. Therefore, you're bound to do it. You're obligated by law to wear these helmets. And there's lots of different ways in which we can think about how paternalism would work in this way. The general idea is it's a violation of one's autonomy. It's a violation of one's ability to express and do what they want with their body, right? Or to decide what they want to do with their life. So if the government tells me I must wear a seatbelt, that's a violation of my ability, my autonomous choice to decide not to. So that's the basic gist behind paternalism. Now let me say a few things about Mill's harm principle. So John Stuart Mill was a philosopher who advocated for what's called utilitarianism. The basic idea here is the morally right thing to do is that which maximizes happiness or maximizes pleasure. And so anything that doesn't do that is the wrong thing to do. But Mill did think that autonomy was a really important principle, right? Mill thought that our ability to freely choose what we want to do with our lives is a way in which we maximize happiness. And so anything that would violate one's right or one's ability to, do what they want with their life, that would not be maximizing happiness. In some way, that would be harming them. And so insofar as we want to avoid harming people, we want them to be able to utilize and express their autonomous choice, well, we should do that for them. Paternalism seems to violate that, and so Mill thought, on this very utilitarian ethics-based way of looking at this issue, that was wrong, right? So Mill's harm principle, again, this is not a definition, this is sort of just a general way to think about it, but Mill's harm principle basically says something like, the only justification for a violation of one's autonomy is if and when their autonomous action would harm someone else. So the only real justification that can be given for a violation of autonomy is if or when that their autonomous choice or their autonomous actions would bring harm to someone else. So if it's the case that their autonomous choice or their autonomous action would bring harm to themselves but to no one else, then that is not a good justification for the violation of one's autonomy. That's Mill's harm principle. It is very much related to the principle of do no harm or non-maleficence, right? Because we don't want to do things that would harm people. And it looks like violation of one's autonomy, according to Mill at least, would harm people. It would not be maximizing happiness or pleasure. And so it just wouldn't be justified at all, not according to this utilitarian view of these issues. So that's kind of how paternalism and Mill's harm principle are related to each other, as well as how they're related to this principle of autonomy and non-maleficence. We'll continue to bring these issues to the fore as we discuss the different problems in this course. But this is a way to sort of begin thinking about the four basic principles of bioethics as they relate to the issues we're going to talk about in medical ethics.